Down in Liddesdale today, the area of southern Scotland notorious for fighting and border reivers and cross-border warfare between Scotland and England. The place that was dubbed the bloodiest valley in Europe in the 16th century. But when you think of Liddesdale, and you think of the strongholds and castles down here, immediately you think of one place. And that place is here, Hermitage Castle. Hermitage here played a massively important role in the Wars of Independence. But really, it's only survived on this site in its current incarnation since around the 14th century. There were huge, important strongholds or castles in Liddesdale long before this, and that's what I want to investigate today. Potentially as long ago as the 6th century AD, two enormous fortresses stood further south down this valley, right on the River Liddel, and they now mark the Scots-English border. But they were formidable, renowned, notorious places in their time, but both were basically out of existence by the time Hermitage was built. But what I've heard is there are some dramatic and obvious remains of both sides. So let's go south to the River Liddel and find the remains or the site of Liddel Castle and Liddel Strength. And this is the first of those sites that's known as Liddel Castle. The problem with this site, because it is so ancient, by the mid-14th century this place was basically vacated. So there's not a hell of a lot written about it, but it does occupy an extremely dramatic, if somewhat dangerous position. Yeah, it's right on this extremely high cliff that comes from nowhere in this field, so you need to be careful if you do come down here. But you can still see the huge ramparts here, absolutely massive. The castle was built for or by the de Sulz family. At the top of the mount here you can see the fantastic defences and magnificent view right down the River Liddel Valley there. Wow! The Lord de Soule was apparently murdered here in the castle by his servants in the 14th century. But it's really one of the only tales I can find about the place. It's so old. But just looking at these fortifications, this fantastic position on this promontory or cliffside here, you know, you can just imagine this is a place of fighting and war, and a place that featured prominently in the Scottish Wars of Independence. The entire complex is split into these really two definite sections. There's one I'm standing on, then the huge ditch in the middle here, across to another plateau there above the river. Wow. Now, one thing which really puts this place on the map and marks it as an important place in history was twice, once in 1296 and once in 1298, King Edward I, Edward Longshanks himself, stayed in this very castle, and it's documented. The castle here was the main structure in the village of Castleton, which just lay to the south of the castle. But all traces of the village and the castle, apart from the ramparts here and the base of the market cross from the village, have all disappeared. The place is forgotten about. There's nothing even written about it, never mind to look at. Such a shame. Castle here was not the only castle on the River Liddel before Hermitage. There was in fact another, and probably one of more renown, more legend, more written history, but one I've never been to. So let's go and see if we can find the castle known as Liddel Strength. The next castle, Liddel Strength, is proven to be a bit more difficult to reach. And also to get to Liddel Strength, it is on the River Liddel, about 10 miles downstream from Liddel Castle. But at this point, the River Liddel marks the current day Scots-English border. And sadly I've had to cross the frontier. We're now on the English side. I think this is definitely it now. This is the outer rampart of Liddel Strength, the ancient fortress. The scale of this place is enormous. I'm over the first big ditch there, and there's this huge palisade, but this is only the outer ring. There's still an even bigger ditch and a bigger hill in the centre there. Let's get up there. This really dwarfs the Liddel Castle at the other end. Wow. It's extremely steep as well and muddy, and you definitely wouldn't want to come here in the summer, because even now, in the middle of February, it is extremely overgrown. Wow, what's up here? It's like a mangrove. You can see here, maybe you can see here, like its counterpart, Liddel Castle, it sits on an extremely high, extremely steep cliff above the river Liddel below there. Completely guarded on that side, and completely guarded all around by the huge, huge ramparts. Yeah, this is definitely not a place to visit in the summer. The vegetation is thick everywhere, but there's so much going on. There's ditches everywhere, mounds, signs of masonry. God knows what they all are. This must be now the pinnacle of the whole complex. Might get a better view from up here. Wow. Oh wow. The castle stood here for centuries, but in the mid-1300s, William Douglas, the Lord of Liddesdale, the Black Knight, along with King David II, came down and raided the English castle. They slew the place, razed it to the ground, and it was never rebuilt again. So basically, after the middle of the 14th century, this place was no more. It's a wonder that these ditches have survived to the level that they have. But the history of Liddel Strength here goes back much further than the Scottish Wars of Independence. You see, in the 6th century, the Battle of Arthurite was apparently fought on these fields here. And a meeting between Merlin the Wizard and St Mungo in this very castle led to Merlin, who was driven insane by the battle, heading north into the forests of the Scottish borders. You can just imagine the battle taking place in those fields right there. There's definitely a bit of square worked masonry there. I wonder if that was from the actual castle. This place has never been properly excavated. You just wonder, and amongst all these thickets there must be so much archaeology, so much evidence of what went on here. There are remains of a good few old buildings here in the vicinity of Liddel Strength, but none so ancient as that castle up on the hill. These are probably more 15th, 16th century border reaver type structures. But the one thing that these two ancient fortresses on the Liddel bring home to me is how much of a war zone, how much of a collision point of cultures and peoples this land has always been. A lot of people have this notion in their head that this was a land of milk and honey until the beginnings of the first Scottish and English wars of independence at the end of the 13th century. It's been a war zone for far, far longer than that. Whether it be the change in geography, a migration of people from the north, a migration of people from the south, and this just happened to be where they met, I don't know. But it's always, until the last couple of 100 years, been an arena of fighting and violence. So please, come down, have a look at these sites yourself, marvel at the martial history of the Scottish and English borderlands long before the likes of William Wallace, Robert the Bruce and Edward Longshanks.